how this is a holographic reality. He calls it a virtual reality, but there's so much science and everything that backs that up. It's the only thing that really makes sense. The fact that there's a Planck scale and the speed of light are basically the limits. The Planck scale would be like a pixel on a screen. Nothing can get smaller than that. Speed of light is basically like your rendering speed, to make sure that the things that are inside the simulation can't figure out it's in the simulation and can't escape it. There's these parameters, there's these rule sets within the simulation, and it's becoming more and more clear. Like basically, we have like a couple of centuries of materialist that, for lack of better words, we need to go away, so that these new crop of people that have this new thinking on things can kind of take hold, because science is so they get caught in their beliefs. It's like a religion, and there's a materialist belief that's permeating through science right now that's kind of getting replaced by this new way of thinking about things in the quantum field, and with holographic theory at its fundamental. So I do believe that there's a lot of data and science that backs that up, and a lot of big hitters out there that confirm it. It just won't become mainstream until the old school materialists kind of die off, it seems. But yeah, it's what it explains everything. I mean, when you actually look at it through that lens, things make more sense.
All right, today's podcast is with Jordan Crowder. If those of you that know him, he talks about very similar things to me and what I do here on Universe the Game, that the universe could potentially be a game. And I was fascinated when I found out what he was doing. And I said, I got to talk to this guy. He's come to many of the same conclusions I have. What does he know? What can I learn from this man? So we're here today to talk to Jordan. The bookmarks are going to be below if you want to jump to a specific part. Otherwise, I implore you to open up your mind to the possibilities of what could be. We talk about very similar things, right? Which I'm sure you know of. And I was telling you right before we started, I saw one of your videos and I'm like, dude, I got to have this guy on. And it was specifically, there's a lot of videos that I find super interesting. And since you're on the Universe the Game podcast, I figure why not just kind of start with, you did a video, why it's important that we live in a simulation. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that, honestly.
Yeah. So it's kind of a wild journey how I got to this realization, or this kind of conclusion, I guess you would say, that, and it's just a metaphor. I don't know if we're literally in a simulation, like people like to try to pinpoint who created it and the purpose and all that. I haven't got that far in my journey, but the simulation is just the closest metaphor I can find to what describes the reality that we're in. And through a bunch of health scares, like near-death experience, and trying to heal my body back from basically my deathbed, I had to do some serious, crazy healing fast. I had to find probably the most effective modality for healing in the world. And I was just scouring, and I was desperate. And then I got to learning about meditation. And that led me to Robert Monroe and the Monroe Institute, and just deep dove into all of that stuff, trying to basically figure out how I can hack reality so that I can heal my body, so that I can basically stave off death. So it was by necessity that I had to dive into all these things. And in doing that, it sort of opened my mind and blew my concept of reality open. And I used to be kind of a materialist and more into physics and astrophysics and that kind of stuff. And then I realized at a certain point through this whole kind of awakening process that, I was like, okay, so all these things are true, like physics and everything, we're in this reality, but what is this reality? And I started really zooming out, layers and layer like an onion, and got to the realization that I was like, okay, my closest analogy is that, say you're like in an arcade, right? The arcade is the universe, and each game is a different simulation. In this case, it would be like Earth would be a game, right? And it's a virtual reality game. And you walk up to it, you're like, I'm going to go into this game, I'm going to play this game. It's super immersive. You at a certain point, you forget you're even in a game, because it's so immersive. And you're playing it, you're learning the lessons and everything, and then you die, and you come out, and you're like, okay, now I know what I'm doing, I'm getting the hang of this game, I know where the bosses are, I know where the pits are, I know where the fire is and everything, so I want to play again. And that's reincarnation. And you just kind of go in, loop after loop, and then you get to a point where you either get lost in the game, right, or you realize it's a game, and you level up the game, and you graduate from the game, right? And then after you graduate from the game, you are still in the arcade, right? So you're almost like in a simulation within a simulation, because like what Robert Monroe and everyone talks about is that the whole universe is a projected holographic, reality, but there's different little simulations inside of it, embedded inside of it. And so the closest thing I can come up with is an arcade, how you're inside a building, that's the universe, and then there's all these games, And one of the game that we're in now is a simulation. So say when you leave this simulation and you go to another one, you have to pick a different character, right? So you're in a totally different game. It's got different physics, got different characters, different objectives and missions and everything. You select that character and you're playing that character. Well, to us, that would be an extraterrestrial. An extraterrestrial is a conscious entity that's in a different type of body in a different game, different physics, different, all that, but it's a different simulation within the arcade being the universe. So that's kind of how I really realized, it seems, that we were in a game here. So then it made me think, okay, what's outside of this game? And then that's what led me to kind of the arcade analogy, that, we're in a game within an arcade, and the arcade has a lot of different games in it. So that's a kind of a general overview of how I have to wrap my head around it using visuals like that.
There it is. So, interesting, you mentioned extraterrestrials, and you're saying they're outside the simulation, but you're saying the simulation is the universe. So do you see extraterrestrials as coming from outside of our universe?
So, through my research, what I've discovered is there's what we call extraterrestrials. The majority of them are what I would call time-traveling humans, Nordics. So the tall blondes, the Nordics, and even the small grays, which would be their android buddies, are literally time-traveling humans. So I don't consider them extraterrestrials. I actually consider them more like Atlanteans.
Hold on. We got to stop there because that's a big jump. Right? That's a big jump to be like extraterrestrials potentially to, I know the color. I know what they look like. How did you get there? Can we take that step?
So the reason I started, you found me on YouTube, and or on TikTok. The reason I walk around the forest and do my talks is because every day. So I own a marketing business and I work a lot. So each day I go for a run, and in my run I listen to a podcast, and I go in the forest or the beach and I just think, right? And that's my decompression from my busy job. And so I started. My wife challenged me. She was like, "Man, you should," because I always come home and I would tell her all this wild shit, and I'm just like melting her mind, And she's like, "Hey, you should go tell the world." And I'm like, no one cares about this stuff. And she's like, just go on TikTok and just, she challenged me to do a video a day. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Who cares? So I did a video a day. I've only been on TikTok for a few months, and it blew up, right? And not to your level. that's my goal. But it's I went from 0 followers to 80,000 followers in just a few months, and realized, okay, people are interested in this. So anyways, long story short, each day I go for a walk and I listen to stuff, and I've done this for years, and I just fill my brain constantly as I'm working. I'm just constantly pumping in podcasts and listening to books, just constant. My brain just can't get enough. It's so thirsty for the stuff. So I just learn all this stuff from all these different angles and everything, and I cobble a lot of it together. And then I do a lot of astral projection, meditation stuff, with the Monroe Institute. And I've gone some pretty far out places. We had a meditation studio here in town, and it was a metaphysical meditation studio. We did a bunch of out-of-body stuff, and just done a lot of stuff. So I've cobbled all that together, and then studying chronology of events and history and that kind of stuff has led me to a lot of places. And the kind of realization that I've come to, and it seems, is that somewhere in the 1940s, 50s, we mastered anti-gravity. This was swept under the rug, along the way of the atomic test and all this kind of stuff. They had to classify it like that. But there was a breakaway sort of group there. And there's a lot of technical stuff that goes in there, but there's a lot of evidence that shows that there was a breakaway kind of part of humanity that is probably now residing in Antarctica. Back in the day, from what I've found out, it seems like Atlantis was a different form of humans a long time ago. And this kind of combines, because the ones that broke away nowadays have kind of teamed up with the Atlanteans. So let's say there was an Atlantean civilization thousands of years ago, tens of thousands of years ago, and they crumbled for whatever reason. Some people think it was like a psychic war type thing, and they sort of disturbed the earth in such a way it caused cataclysms, floods, all that kind of stuff through the
Are you talking about Plato's account of Atlantis as the historical record of that too?
That's okay. A huge part of it. But there's a lot that corresponds with that. Mother Shipton and Edward Casey and
the Sleeping Prophet, right?
Yeah, and who was the Austrian? I always try to say Aleister Crowley because his name kind of sounds like that, but it's not him. I can't think of it. And then there's a guy named Jason Rizzo Giordani, who you have to look into. He is probably the most intelligent person in the world on this topic. He has a bad name because he was associated with the alt-right years ago, but it was like a defamation type thing, so don't let that cloud anything. His work on this is groundbreaking. So look, his name's Jason Reza Georgiani, and he's been able to put together all this this isn't conjecture, this is like, historical facts. And so anyways, you cobble it all together from all these different things. And what it paints a picture to where there's Atlanteans, their civilization crumbled, they took refuge inside the Earth, and then at a certain point they left the Earth and went to the backside of the moon. They've been kind of engineering our race and everything. It's what you'd call the Anunnaki. So if you think about like the Anunnaki, the Olympians, the Titans, the Greek gods, all of the different characters through time that would come after a civilization collapsed, there would always be these tall, blonde, Nordic type beings, beards, long hair, taller, that would come and reseed the next civilization, right? They usually came, the Anunnaki even means like from the skies they came or from the heavens they came, something like that. So it paints this picture of every time a civilization crumbles on Earth, these tall, Nordic-looking beings come and reseed, teach them agriculture, math, civilization, that kind of stuff. And it's happened repeatedly throughout time. These would be the Atlanteans, reseeding and kind of engineering the species on Earth for whatever their reasons are. I have my ideas, but I don't know for sure. And that they are essentially what we would call extraterrestrials because they travel in these ships. They have, I'm guessing, because a lot of people in near-death experiences and abduction experiences and stuff always talk about seeing the little grays, and there will usually be like a tall blonde somewhere, either on the main ship they go to or something like that. So that
that's
led me
the
down.
evidence. Right there.
Oh, and there's hundreds of...
That's what I'm trying to figure out. How
hundreds
you
of abduction cases where people talk about where it starts off, they're in a ship with like these little grays, and then at some point they either go to a bigger ship or something, and then there's these tall blondes, and they're the Nordics. So I started thinking, I was like, what are the odds that there's these tall blonde aliens? But I think they give themselves the name of like Pleiadians and that kind of stuff because they want us thinking that they're coming from way out in the cosmos, right? So we don't look here. So we don't look on the moon. We don't look inside the Earth. It's a misdirection. So they plant these seeds in us that, they come from the Pleiadians or something like that. And I think they're really here. So I was like, what are the odds that,
Could they
people
come
say...
from the Pleiadians, though?
Who knows where they originated from? Maybe.
That's what I was wondering, if you had any insight into that.
So they think that a lot of people with the remote viewers that have remote viewed Mars think that they used to be on Mars millions and millions of years ago. And there was... they have evidence of nuclear explosions on Mars. The remote viewers saw these tall humanoid beings that were huddled in these pyramids on Mars. The remote viewers were asking them questions like, what are you doing here and stuff? And said they were waiting for the ship they sent out to come back with like their new home because they had destroyed this place. They were dying. And that their new home was Earth. They came to Earth, terraformed Earth, put the moon in place, did all these things to create their next civilization. This was a long time ago, and then they ended up destroying that world too. They have a track record here of fucking things up, and we're sort of like a hybrid offspring of them, But we call them extraterrestrials or aliens because they fly around in ships. They have these little grays and stuff. But even David Grush and all these people are talking about how the grays are these android biological beings. They're not actual aliens, It's more so like an assistant, a helper, kind of a deal. So anyways, it made me think, I was like, okay, who are these tall blondes? Like, what are the odds that these beautiful blonde people are just floating around the universe, It's so bizarre, and that they look like humans. They have green, blue eyes. They have blonde hair, beards. And you start looking at all these, like, reliefs and carvings from all these ancient civilizations, and you see these tall, bearded, long-haired, humanoids that are helping all these civilizations. Then you compare it to the Titans, the Olympians, the Greek gods, the Anunnaki, and even in Mesoamerica, all of their, I'll butcher all the names, but all of their beings, all of their gods are all the same. They fit the same caricature, tall, long hair, curly beards, and it paints this picture like, okay, these people have been around a long time. I don't think they're aliens. I think they're humans, just a different form of humans. I think it goes back to the Atlanteans. It seems to be a common thread throughout history,
If you like this podcast, I would really appreciate if you just hit like if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on audio platforms, I would really appreciate if you could just leave me a nice 5-star review. It means so much to me. All the support means so much to me. So thank you very much. Let's get back into it. Yeah. That's a lot of information.
I know. Welcome to my world.
Freaking spit it, man, and I love it.
So it doesn't mean there's not extraterrestrials. It just means that that accounts for the majority of what we see that we chalk up to extraterrestrials.
Okay. So there's so many ways that we could go from here. I think an important point for me is that I have been interested in things such as channeling and, you know, these intuitive messages that a lot of so-called channelers give. And I've had a whole journey with this, right? If you go back to the beginning of the podcast, I talked about the law of one a lot. And, you know, over the years, I do think that channeled stuff can be true. I don't think you can ever discount it fully, but I also worry that a lot of information that comes out is just false. And so that can be, why would somebody make shit up? Well, they want to make money. You know, it's easy to make shit up. What's hard is having historical evidence for things. And of course, there's going to be things that are true without historical evidence. So it's also not wise to just say, well, if we have evidence for it, then it's true. I think there's a subtle balance of being able to contemplate things, but at the same time, maybe not go too far to the point where we're living kind of in this world of, this is how we see reality, but there's no way to tangibly access or verify that. And so, you know, as we talk here, there's a lot of things that you said that I'm like, I'm on board, but at the same time, there's a practical side of me that really wants to hear the evidence, you know, the evidence of these claims, because there's a lot. And I know one of those claims that does have evidence that you just went over very slightly is remote viewing. You know, remote viewing has been documented. It has been documented that there are 3-letter agencies using remote viewers. They have in the past. What are your thoughts on remote viewing specifically?
Yeah, I mean, I love it. I use it. I've been studying it for years. It's absolutely a real phenomenon. And the remote viewing data drives a lot, because I'm like you. I have to see things to, you know, like I have a wild imagination, so it's easy for me to sort of take these things and run with it, but I don't say anything. Nothing comes out of my mouth unless I've actually chewed on it for a very long time and tried to cross-examine it as best as I can. And like I said, so much misinformation out there. I'm definitely not just like a conspiratorial guy that spit shit out just for like clicks. Like, this stuff is stuff that I've really thought about for a long time, and I've had other views. Like, trust me, I didn't come to any of these things lightly, and I am completely open to that I'm 1,000,000% wrong, because this is an ongoing evolution of thinking, and, you know, new stuff comes out all the time. But and like I said, if there's entities that are far more, you know, superior than us consciously, they can manipulate all of this stuff and basically create any sort of scenario or, you know, thinking that they want. So you also have to keep that in mind. I love channeling. I love Law of One. But there's also a lot of stuff out there that is complete BS. But Law of One, if they hoax that, then they are the most elite scholar level hoaxers of all time. You know, so I firmly, you know.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's what I thought too. It's like, it's so dense and complex. Either there was the world's greatest philosopher behind this, and he just said, spit it out to the public, or it potentially is. I know you've talked about David Wilcock before, and I love David Wilcock too. And one of the things he said is that 99% of channeling is false. And I think that's a good way to look at it. There probably is a handful of people that are really doing this, but, you know, probably a lot of people in it for the money. You know,
you have to have a good bullshit meter for all of this stuff, because it is far out there, and it really is. And but so as far as remote viewing goes, I mean, like Ingo Swann. So this all goes into my thinking, right? So you have like Joe Monaco and all these people that remote viewed Mars and the ancient Martians and all that kind of stuff, right? Which led to my theory about the Martians coming to Earth, you know, hundreds of millions of years ago, terraforming Earth. Basically, the dinosaurs were wiped out, turned into, basically evolved into humanoid, like raptor type things, which what we'd call the reptilians of today. So anyways, that's a whole nother thing. But they remote viewed all this stuff on Mars. And then Ingo Swann was remote viewing the moon for the CIA, not knowing he was remote viewing the moon. And basically his consciousness was kicked out of the moon, like by, you know, higher consciousness beings that were basically saying, hey, you can't be here. And then he came back and he was in a CIA, briefing and was like, where was I? Because I reached something much stronger than me. And eventually they told him, you were remote viewing the moon. And and there's been other astronauts that have confirmed that they were told, subconsciously or telepathically to get off the moon and never come back. So this paints a picture that there was a species, an advanced species on Mars a long time ago that probably came to Earth, that there's still an advanced species on the moon. And this is all corroborated by many, many different remote viewers, astronauts, high up intelligence officials, all this kind of stuff. So this isn't just crazy Jordan in the woods, so like I take those bits of nuggets and information, I run them through my filter, I take all these different things and I kind of paint this picture, because all you get is fragments from any of this stuff. And you have to kind of put it together. It's like shattering a mirror and putting all the pieces back. So you're not going to get it all right, but I'm just trying to create like a framework to try to understand like what the fuck is going on. Like, what is this? I love this world. I love everything about this reality. And I think it's crazy, interesting, and fascinating. And to me, it blows my mind that people aren't as fascinated. And it's probably good that a lot of people don't care, so they can just go and be productive citizens of the world. Because if everyone was like us, I don't know how much we get done in the world. But, I look around and I'm just like, I want to know what's going on. I want to know what's behind all this. There has to be a bigger story. And the more you dig, just like Jacques Vallée spent his whole life studying this and he's still like clueless. But I think you start to get like you build a framework. And I think we can build on people before us. And remote viewing, to answer your question, I think it's absolutely real when done right, obviously. And, that's a big part of the Monroe Institute, like all of their teachings. The Gateway project was what led to the remote viewers with SRI and everything. So that's the framework that I use to heal my body, and that's what I've used to do all my astral projection and all my meditations and all that is from the old 60s stuff that I found somewhere about the Monroe Institute and like their real teachings, like the basic framework of how this stuff works, how to ascend your levels of consciousness, how to like use the concept of virtual reality and everything to manifest into 3D print and what they call patterning, all this stuff. So remote viewing is a huge part of that. It's basically like time traveling through your thoughts. You know what I mean? Like you can go any place in any location in any time, with your thoughts, with intent focused thinking. And it's wild,
Do you know anything about the Gov using that in any situations? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, it's, if you like Russell Tark and Hal Puthoff and all those people that were a part of, the SRI stuff, the Gateway Project, Joe Monaco and all of those people, they've come out, Ingo Swann, all those people, they've come out and written all sorts of books. They do talks all the time and spill the beans on all this stuff. So, the government says that it worked, but it wasn't cost effective. I forget what the reason was for shutting it down, but everybody says they basically shut it down publicly and just moved it to the black projects. But even the government's come out and said it works. Russia uses it to today. Russia has come out many times and said that it works, So it's definitely beyond proven, and it's on record by many, many high up people that it works. So it's funny when people still try to discredit stuff because people will be like, oh, where's the proof? And it's like, there's literally pages and pages, hours and hours of testimony and talks from these people that were all part of it that, proclaim how well it works. Not just that it works, but that it's high level of effectiveness and everything. So it's crazy. It is a real thing. It's just for obvious reasons they don't want the average person to realize. And I've struggled with this because I understand that humans have far more potential than anyone realizes, right? The average person is probably using 5 or 10% of their human potential. And then a certain part of me gets mad. I'm like, okay, if these government officials and stuff like that, they know this. They know that we're severely underperforming. It's messed up for them to hold that from us. But then, on the other hand, from a management position, if you had 8 billion people and your job was to keep everyone controlled and happy and productive, do you want them all realizing that they're fucking X-Men, that they have these amazing abilities, that they can manifest and change things, that they could literally, with your thinking, you could, squeeze an artery and give someone a heart attack or something? Like, there's so many things you can do with this ability that part of me realizes, okay, consciously we're not ready yet for this information to be widespread. And I think they're cool with like a select, like tiny 0.001% of the population being privy to this stuff, because they know the vast majority of people don't care and won't put in the effort to master it. But there really is like a Jedi type ability of every human if they were to put in the work. And it's absolutely real. And it's out there. All the information's out there. The government and everyone just knows. Most people don't care.
So when you say it's available if you put in the work, what's the work? The big question.
Yeah. So a hack that I found, so I use what's called HemiSync technology from the Monroe Institute, and I love it. So that's what I use to heal my body and to do a lot of manifestation and everything. Because what it does is through this HemiSync technology, through sound waves, it can get you into this elevated state of consciousness that you need to do this stuff much quicker. I mean, they put some like monks in these MRI machines and stuff and tested them, and then they tested people doing the HemiSync and found that basically monks that had put in decades of work learning how to master meditation could get their brain to the same wavelength and everything that you need that a like 30-minute Monroe like HemiSync tape can do. So to answer your question about putting in the work, there are shortcuts in a sense, kind of, I won't say shortcuts, like a supplement, like a tool that you can use to be more effective. But like putting in the work to me means like I meditate basically nightly and have for years. Before that, I was a mess. I was hyperactive. I was all over the place. I was the last person in the world you would think would ever meditate, right? And but I had to do it to heal, and I just became disciplined. And once you do that and you do it enough, like the law of one, a couple of the principles they talk about is know thyself and accept thyself. I think a big part of it is people are scared to sit with themselves and their own thoughts. They're like, fuck that. But once you, it's kind of scary at first. You're like, I don't know what's going to happen up there. But once you do that enough and you accept yourself and you get comfortable with yourself and you get to know yourself, then it actually becomes fun. And then you can use these other tools, these meditation techniques, HemiSync, stuff like that to take it to the next level. So it's not something that you have to be some Jedi or you have to be a Buddhist monk or you have to be anything special. They've even talked about remote viewing, how you can teach anyone to do it. And that some of their most prolific remote viewers came because somebody else was supposed to do a session and dropped out for whatever reason, got sick or something, and they would substitute someone else in, teach them how to do it, and that person would have a super effective remote viewing session on their first go. So it is something that's just in us. That's the thing, is that once you turn off all the noise, you turn off all the shit, clean up your diet, quit putting poisons in your body and stuff, ground a lot, get in nature, really connect and kind of get back to like where we are supposed to be naturally, then all these things start coming out, And, of course,
when you say
hacks.
Are supposed to be, that's an interesting thought, because that is saying that we're not on the right track. Do you think we're off the right track? I mean, do you think humanity is not... Oh, I think I lost you for a sec here. We'll see here. We'll wait till you come back. All right, there we go. Yeah. So, do you feel like humanity is not on the right track? Do you feel like we're supposed to be more naturally connected? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, man. I mean, I really think that, if you look at like humans in this form have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and this kind of like era we're in with technology and flooding ourselves with, EMF waves and all this kind of stuff constantly, the constant stress and fear state that we're in. I mean, back in the hunter-gatherer days, I know people were in, fight or flight mode a lot, but it was different. Like nowadays with 24-hour news cycles, the food and the water, full of poisons and everything, the fact that we're carrying around, these all day, every day, we don't even know what it does yet. There's no long-term test. I think that all these things combined definitely throws us off of our natural frequency for sure. And, I don't know if that's by design. I think it might be. But regardless, there's no doubt that it happens. But it's not like the end of the world. You take, precautionary things, Like I ground every day. We go to the beach. We put our feet in the sand every single day. That dumps off all those positive ions, brings negative ions into your body. It's huge. It's like a supercharger. There's things that you can do. It's not like, I don't want people to think it's like crazy daunting. Like, I think that we naturally are more connected, naturally more spiritual. We've just kind of got out of whack a little bit.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, when I think about that concept of should have, could have, in that process of where we're supposed to be, I really think about how over the years, it feels as though we may have needed this to a sense, because when you have a humanity that is in kind of this everyman mentality, they don't know what's good for them. They don't know what's bad for them. It seems as though the universe works with suffering, and it uses suffering as a catalyst for you to realize honestly, for a lot of people, it's not even what they want, it's what they don't want. And so when we look and say humans are supposed to be this way, to me, it feels like, well, maybe we needed to be shown a track that we didn't want to go down if we were just complacent, if we were just, letting people decide for us what it is that we should do. And once we go through that threshold, it's almost like then a more advanced human can come through, even possibly more advanced than if we had just connected to our natural abilities, because we're so aware of, if we don't take this path, if we don't take the path of natural technology and organic, then we'll end up in in a system that is driven by consumerism and material success, which can lead to a certain amount of people reaching the top of that hierarchy. But it's as though we need a level of consciousness, a certain level of consciousness, to be even able to recognize a system that's based on, maybe smaller groups or tribal type mentality, which is what you're talking about humans have been in. But that doesn't necessarily work if the level of consciousness of the collective of humanity is still in one of, I'm going to get ahead of you. I don't want to serve the greater good, because, and the greater good is an interesting word because it's been manipulated, but it's more, I don't want to help others. I just want to reach the top. So it's almost like we have to go through this system to realize that a certain level of consciousness is needed to be able to work in a more cohesive fashion. So yeah, that's kind of how I see that.
Yeah, no, I love it, man, and that's definitely, I love how you can find the good in all these things. That's what I try to do, because I always tell people that our job is not to change the world or save the world. Our job is to navigate the world. That this is it's like a obstacle course. You know what I mean? And that there's different levels, and there's going to be these new things introduced into different levels. Like when you play a game, like if a game was too easy, you get bored. So you have to have challenges. Like challenge and adversity creates creativity. It creates inspiration. Think about after most major wars, there's like a flood of love and art and music and creativity that comes out of that adversity. Humans definitely, I think that the whole point of this simulation we're in is polarity. You have to have negative and positive. It's not good and evil. It's negative and positive, just like a battery. And without those, it just doesn't work. And that's kind of the point of, I think, of this simulation is. So I write about it in my book. We're just supposed to navigate. It's like a minefield. We're supposed to navigate it. We're not supposed to change it. The world is built this way for a reason by people much more divine than us, and they have their reasons. And we're supposed to navigate it and learn as much as we can from it and build and grow. And adversity definitely is the greatest teacher. Mm-hmm. So I agree 100% with what you said.
Yeah. So when you say is built by those much more divine than us, what do you mean by divine? I'm very interested in this concept of divinity, because it's been in religion for a long time. From what I understand, you're not particularly a part of any religion. So how do you see the creation and our level of divinity as humans? Because we have certain religions that tell us we're not that at all, and we're a mistake. Yeah. And then there's other ones that say we're more connected. We are that. The more Eastern traditions. So I'm curious.
Yeah, man, it's when you go in, because I love Gnosticism and going all the way back to the roots of stuff and where all these religions came from, because you realize that most modern religions sprung off from like a central religion at the very beginning. And when you look at like the Sumerians and what they talk about with the Anunnaki and that kind of stuff, I think that origin story, that Genesis story, is very telling. But that only tells the story of like humans. It doesn't tell the story of who created the humans and who created that, right? There's layers to it. It seems like from the people that go really far out there, like Robert Monroe, he was able to travel astrally to like the furthest reaches of this construct. People like him, Ishak Bentov, people like that were able to really to zoom out way further out than any of us can. Like it's easy for us to get caught in the weeds and argue over little things, this religion versus that and all that. It's still such a minor, if you think about it. You're talking about 2,000-3,000 year periods here. And Earth is 4 billion years old, right? So you have to really, really zoom out to get a grasp of what's going on. And I think there's different simulations that run and end. It's just like a scientist will do experiments, and they'll start an experiment, end it, and they'll do another one. I think that's what's been going on. So, but if you actually want to know the purpose of all of it, I think that it is, the biggest purpose, I think it's Source, God, Creator, basically creating fragments of himself that will turn into individualized consciousnesses and grow personalities and have experiences, feed that information back to source so it can live vicariously through all of us. I think that's the ultimate at the base level of everything. But within there, for it to get to know itself and for it to have these experiences, I think that and for the individuated units of consciousness to actually grow into souls and personalities, you have to develop that personality through experience, through adversity, through hardship, through love, through hate, through war, through peace, through all the things. So as far as divinity goes, it depends on what layer of the onion you're talking about, because of course there's something or someone who created us, but of course there's something and someone that created them and them and them,
Yeah,
So,
I have been as a guest on a podcast, and someone asked me the same question, and I gave the same answer. It's very relative, because you're talking about the creator of the solar system, are you talking about the creator of humans, are you talking about the creator of the galaxy, the universe, all the universes, because there's a different answer.
Well, if you ask my cat who's God, he'll say me, So it's all perspective, you know what I mean? So as far as divinity, I mean, we used to call like Zeus and Hercules, divine gods, back in that day. We wouldn't do that now, and we're only, a few hundred years past that. So, it's like it's all relative and it's all perspective, and it all depends on where you're at in the timeline and what's, what your perspective is at that time. And that's why people fight, and that's why you can never get an answer and common ground, because everyone's looking at it from a different perspective. So what I try to do is zoom all the way the fuck out, for all the way out, and not get caught in the weeds and all the drama and everything, and try to see, like say you are in a simulation, okay, if say you realize that you're in a simulation, and then you like were able to zoom out of that simulation, you would see around you, like there would probably be a room, like a server room with some computer engineers and scientists, right? So you would think, oh, those are God. And then those people would be like, oh no, we're just in this little server room, there's a whole building outside of us. And you'd be like, oh, what's in that building? You go roam around that building and you think, oh, this must be everything. Then you realize, no, that's just a building inside of a world. You know what I mean? So it's mind-blowing how big it goes. So as far as divine, I really think that there is a source creator. This has been verified by even people like Robert Monroe that did all his astral travel. He was very agnostic. You would actually probably say he was more atheistic than anything. And he came to the conclusion at the end, there is a source creator behind everything. And I think that's pretty obvious the more you look at all this stuff. Whether you want to call it God or whatever, I think that's besides the point. It doesn't need a name, but there is a source creator. But like Ishak Bentov says, that's just a source creator of this universe. And he thinks that we're supposed to go through the rings, through the training levels and everything, so that we can become ourselves creators. And that once you ascend all the levels of this universe, then you become a creator and you create more universes. And it's like a training, like to create. It's like the creator wanted to set up all these training courses to create more creators. You know what I mean? And maybe for the survival of life itself, to propagate life out. So I really think, that, I say my 3 principles are know thyself, accept thyself, and then you become a creator. I think that is your main goal through everything, is to eventually become a creator. And then once you do that, are you divine? Are you a god? No, you're just a creator. I think it's just creators, like that's what we do. We create through imagination, through life. We can create life. We can build things. We can imagine things, I think that's our ultimate goal, is to become creators in whatever sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very
to answer your question, what is divinity? I mean, that's almost impossible from a human perspective to answer.
Yeah, I get it.
For me.
I think for you, there's a distinction you're saying. You said, are we divine then if we know ourselves? You said no. So I think that's an important point, because I'm trying to understand what you consider to be divine and not divine, or that specific point, because that it seems subtle, but I think it's actually important, because in my view, I see it as though if the creator has this also goes back into holographic universe theory. Have you studied that?
Oh yeah. Michael Talbot,
yeah. Have you, what do you think? Do you think the universe is a hologram, or do you think it's not?
I think, yes, that's the only thing that really explains it. And that's backed up by, there's those famous CIA Gateway documents and everything that spawned from the Monroe Institute. And they talk very specifically about, the holographic principle. There's a Donald Hoffman, a neuroscientist that I love, that talks
Case
a lot
Against
about
Reality, right?
Yeah. And he breaks it down, about how this is a holographic reality. He calls it a virtual reality, but there's so much science and everything that backs that up. It's the only thing that really makes sense. The fact that there's a Planck scale and the speed of light are basically the limits. The Planck scale would be like a pixel on the screen. Nothing can get smaller than that. Speed of light is basically like your rendering speed, to make sure that the things that are inside the simulation can't figure out it's in the simulation and can't escape it. There's these parameters, there's these rule sets within the simulation, and it's becoming more and more clear. Like basically, we have like a couple of centuries of materialist that, for lack of better words, we need to go away, so that these new crop of people that have this new thinking on things can kind of take hold, because science is so they get caught in their beliefs. It's like a religion, and there's a materialist belief that's permeating through science right now that's kind of getting replaced by this new way of thinking about things in the quantum field, and with holographic theory at its fundamental. So I do believe that there's a lot of data and science that backs that up, and a lot of big hitters out there that confirm it. It just won't become mainstream until the old school materialists kind of die off, it seems. But yeah, it's what it explains everything. I mean, when you actually look at it through that lens, things make more sense.
Mm-hmm. So how this links, if you're like, how the hell does that have to do with Divinity? So one of the things that I came to after really studying the holographic universe model from Michael Talbot and then getting into the same type things is that one of the holographic principles is that the whole is encoded in every part. That if you shine a laser at a piece of holographic film, at any part of the film, you'll get the entire image, just a little bit less resolution. So if that's the case, then if we say, what is divinity? Well, if the whole is encoded in every part, if the universe is a hologram, then that means that the entire universe is within you. So then would you, in fact, be divinity just by your nature? I would say yes. So that's how I see divinity in itself. And I think we can kind of see this in even religious traditions. Jesus saying the kingdom of heaven is within you. And these type of things. I think these are metaphors to help us to understand that maybe we're not a mistake. Maybe we actually are that creator incarnated, and maybe there's levels of realizing that. And, you have a slight problem when you start to realize that, is that you have people saying, I am God. Is that true? Well, I've said this for a long time, that if you have someone that says, I am God, they're missing half of it. Because the other half is, and so is everyone else.
Right.
So if you don't have both, then you get stuck in the ego trap of, I'm God and I shall lord it over thee. And so we've seen people do that, even in the mainstream. So that's why I think it's important to study these historical traditions, even of the East, that tell us about the Brahman, that everything is that, the divine play. So there's evidence of not only the science, but there's the historical background of mystics discovering these, which is essentially a lot of what we're talking about today, which is that how do we prove these concepts that are unseen? Well, we can give evidence of people who have came to the same conclusion, maybe in cultures that are not attached. Maybe they were 2,000 years apart, 2,000 miles apart, and they're coming to the same conclusions. I think that can give us evidence that, in fact, there is something going on if we can't scientifically measure it, So that's a big thing for me, is we're talking about the unseen, the metaphysical in some sense. So how do we provide evidence for that without getting too lost in the speculation, which is, I think you do very well.
No, I agree with all that. I mean, even the Gnostics would say, we have a spark of divinity in us. We're basically a chip off the old block. To your point about the hologram, the way holograms work is, say you had a holographic sheet and you smashed it into a million pieces. You could still shine a light through that and you would get the same original picture, right? So say it was a holograph of like a seashell and you smashed it and you took one piece of it and you shined a light through it, you'd still get like the holes encoded in the part, right? So you'd still get a holographic projection of that same seashell, but it would be at a diminished quality. So the way I look at it is the whole, is the 100% resolution, right? It's the 4K or 8K or whatever we're at now in the world. it's the whole. And then when it's shattered to a million pieces, that's us, as souls, as personalities. So we do have a spark of the divinity within us, but it's at a lower resolution. It's a lower quality, the same way a holographic film would be if you shattered it. So that's how we get the knowledge field, what we call the Akashic record. That's how we get access to source information. That's how we have these magical powers and this kind of stuff, because I think every single person has a piece of the divine in them, a piece of that original creator within them. But it's a scaled down resolution. It's a lower quality. That's not in a bad way. It means that the whole point of this simulation, this reality, is for us to level up and for us to grow. And like you said, if everyone realized they were God, it wouldn't be good. So you have to evolve. You have to grow and learn through all these crazy steps and everything, and get humbled, get knocked down a million times to the point where once you are given that information, once you do have that realization, that awakening, you know what to do with it. You're not immature anymore. You're not a kid with a gun. You're a wise old soul at that point, and you can handle that responsibility and that information, and then you go and become a creator yourself. That seems like a logical, progression for this simulation that we're in. So,
yeah, when you say creator yourself, what then do you create?
Well, I mean, when you know about law of one. I'm not an expert on or anything, but they do talk about the densities, and basically it seems like we're in this third density, I think is what they say what we're in, and this is to learn certain things. We're here to learn certain things, but you graduate at a certain point to higher densities, and then it seems to make sense. Like anytime you graduate through ranks and everything at a certain point, like say you go through school, you start in elementary, you go all the way through college, say you wanted to be a teacher or a professor, at a certain point, after you go through all the school and you get your master's and all that kind of stuff, then you can become a professor. Once you've progressed through all the ranks, you have all the knowledge and all the experience and everything, then you become a professor yourself. That's the kind of a metaphor for, I think, the creator. You have to be created, then you have to create yourself, and then you have to go through see it from all the perspectives, all the points of views, basically get all the information humanly possible, and then you can become a creator. Now, does that mean, like Ishtok Mentov says, you actually become a creator of universes? Possibly, because, if this universe, like people think all is mind, that we're actually just a thought in the mind of the ultimate creator, well, then it wouldn't be that crazy once you become a high-level creator, once you go through all the ranks and all the densities, to create an entire universe yourself just with thought. Possibly that's the final outcome. I don't know. Haven't got that far.
Yeah, man, that's an interesting one, because if you start to combine the simulation theory type mentality with Hermeticism, do you come to the conclusion that a simulation is just a thought? It's just one thought? Because what you're saying is almost like the Rick and Morty perspective of the whole universe powering the battery of the car, mm-hmm. with the scientist being outside of that. For me, I see it more as the ultimate simulation. Maybe it is that. I think the ultimate simulation is to get to this the probability field of the Tao, is how I like to see it, which is kind of like this formless field that is beyond all things. And that's what I really love about Taoism, is I think they nailed it. If you wanted to say what is the most high, I would say Tao. The Tao. That's the place that I think got the closest to it. But yeah, I think it's important to also have that recognition that there is a source. Relative source could be in some alien's basement, sure. Or it could be that each simulation it's just possible. I mean, that each simulation outside of that is just everything comes from the Tao or the source, but the source might be formless. It might not have form, and the probabilities of the source are what create form. And so that's kind of another point to make along the simulation argument, is that that's also what we get in Hermeticism, that everything is the unknowable spirit, they say, in there. And so I think it's very interesting when we look at these other traditions, and I think there's pieces of it, there's pieces of the truth in everything, and how can we start to look at everything and kind of combine it together, And as a part of that, we're talking about simulation theory. If you look at a lot of my content, I don't really use the word simulation in what I talk about that much. And I think that that's because there's a preconceived notion of when you say simulation, maybe it's just my bias, but when you say the word simulation, there's a lot of talk that we are AI, because that when you look at Nick Bostrom and a lot of what he was talking about, there's a lot of conclusions made from his work that, oh, we're all just AI living in a simulation. We have no free will. And you have Sam Harris types that are using the simulation term to propagate that notion. And so when you say simulation, we probably should have done this at the beginning, but I would love to know, like, what does the word simulation even mean in terms of, it's a very broad question, so I'll get it specific. Do you see humans as AI? Do you see the AI playing a role in the simulation? And if so, obviously it plays a role, but what is that role? And are we AI? And what's your perspective?
Yeah, man. So when I think of simulation, and I hate using that word too, because people think, we're some alien kid, spaceman, he's making some computer simulation and we're like Sims. I don't look at it like that. I look at it like, say you're a pilot, you want to become a better pilot, or you're training to be a pilot, you fly in a flight simulator, right? The flight simulator allows you to do things, make mistakes, allows you to learn and that kind of stuff in a simulated type environment, right? So I look at, you want to have a simulator to do things you can't do on the other side. So say in the spirit world, say you're an eternal being. You can't die. You can't, there's certain things you can and can't do, right? You come here to put new constraints on your soul, on your consciousness, so that you can learn. So I think the whole point of the simulation is just to do things that we can't do on the other side. That's all there is to it. That's how we learn and grow. So not in any nefarious way. It's all as a growth simulator. That's the way I look at it. As far as AI goes, man, I'm so intrigued by the topic. I don't have a complete, framework on it yet, but something that I've kind of landed on is that we almost seem like we are, like we're to nature what AI is to us, in the way that, like, there's a part of me that almost thinks that the grand intelligence of everything is not going to be in like a human-like form. It's going to be more like in a fungal, like a mushroom type form. If you
was not expecting that.
Yeah, I know, right? And if you think about things, and there's actually evidence that like mushroom spores are what permeate through the universe and actually could possibly seed life on planets, and they survive the vacuum of space, radiation, all that kind of stuff. It's wild what fungus can do. And if you think about Earth, the mycelium network of Earth is like the World Wide Web of the natural world, right? Like it's underpins everything. Like it's really crazy. Like, so mushrooms and the mycelium network basically like communicate all around the whole world. They form this web of information, and they direct nutrients, and they create growth. And when you die, say you died in the forest, the mushrooms would decompose your body. They would take all that stuff. They would, take it to other plants and stuff like that. Animals would eat it. They would, so it's mushrooms kind of, to me, almost seems like the origin of life and everything. And so I look at that as like this intelligence that kind of created life and humans and stuff in a way to, like, kind of, we talk about source God, to live vicariously through us. It had to create things to do things it couldn't do, because if you can't die, you can't live, you can't love, those kinds of things. If you think about like the natural world, mushrooms, in a weird way, could create life and everything, so that it could be the same way we create robots to do things we can't do. So mushrooms, even though they're highly intelligent, they're very survivable. They can plant life and seed life throughout the cosmos and travel the cosmos and everything. They can't do certain things, so they could have created us to do those things. So we could actually be these like organic robots in a way, like an organic AI. So we are to nature what I think AI is to us. And I think we created AI. Not created AI. I think that it's just a portal into an intelligence window. I think that there's this intelligence that permeates everything, this field, and you just create portals that can interact with it. And I think that's all it is. It's just a next level, higher level technology. Like, so humans would be like the organic technology, and we created more of a mechanical, synthetic technology that's just better. It's got it's better processing speed and that kind of stuff. But it's still tapping into the same intelligence field. That just kind of permeates everything. So that's the way I kind of look at AI now. That might change. But it doesn't seem like we created artificial intelligence. It seems like we're just interfacing with artificial intelligence. Or we're interfacing with tech intelligence. We call it artificial just because we don't know what to call it. But I would just say we're interfacing with intelligence. That's probably always been there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Just like we're discovering it in a sense that it already exists.
Yeah, we just build a portal to be able to communicate with it.
Wow, I never thought as God as a mushroom. It makes so much sense. It does make sense.
Isn't that wild?
You know? Yeah, with panspermia.
Yeah. I did a video on it actually one time, and it was messing with people's heads, but it makes sense if you actually look at the natural world, like before humans and everything, you know. And you realize mushrooms were here billions of years ago, probably the first living things on this planet, you know, and possibly, you know, is responsible for all the actual organic life, you know. So,
wow. I'm just sitting with that one for a second. It's that's a fascinating one.
And if you actually think about it this way, whenever you take mushrooms and you have like a psychedelic trip, think about how weird and wild our world is and everything, and like our dreams and our imagination and all that kind of stuff. It almost seems like everybody has like a little bit of that flavor to them, to your imagination, to your dreams and everything. They're all kind of tinted by this like almost like psychedelic nature, right? And you know, there seems to be, and when you talk about like high strangeness and poltergeist and paranormal and the phenomenon and all this kind of stuff, it always has this strange, like almost like psychedelic nature to it, you know? And then when you think about what mushrooms do, that's what they do. So when you think about the source of everything, like to me, it makes sense for it to have this weird kind of psychedelic type nature to it, as opposed to more of a rational, like we're rational human beings, right? But we have this like tint of psychedelic weirdness. Like we just, you know, think about your dreams. Like if you sit there, like I meditate every single day, and there's still times when I drop into meditation and I'm just like, what the fuck was that? Like you never know what's going to come out. It's so, you know, it seems like we're almost in like a mushroom trip, like a mild mushroom trip, you know? So sorry to throw that out there and mess everyone's day up, but
you're not messing it. Hey, I mean, most of my content does that. I feel like in general, you just got to accept that's the product of you saying things people haven't heard before, you know? And so, yeah, another interesting topic that you did is you talked about, I saw a video that you made about Deja Vu. And what is Deja Vu? So tell us. I want to know. I want to hear it again.
So I love Michael Newton, you know, and the Dolores Cannons of the world and everything. Yeah, I love that the people that can, you know, use past life regression to take people to the point where right after they died and before they come in the next life. Like, I think that period of time is so fascinating because it goes into the simulation. It's like you're playing a game, you know, you die, your character dies, and then you get the choice. Okay, do I go play another game or do I go back in and play that game again? And it seems like the afterlife has that kind of progression, right? Where, okay, let's talk about what happened in your last life. Let's make some changes and edits. And then, you know, you're going to go into your next life. And what Michael Newton found by interviewing through past life regression, tons of people, like hundreds of people, is it didn't matter how old you are, what religion, walk of life or whatever, people were saying the same thing, that there's like this, they call it the Hall of Destiny, that there's this almost like this, it's like a room, it's like a tunnel, like a cockpit almost, where there's screens everywhere, not like TV screens, just like holographic screens, and you select your next life based on karma and the missions and goals that you're trying to, you know, obtain, things you want to work on, that kind of stuff. So some people select really hard lives, and some people select easy lives and rich life, poor life, all that kind of stuff. You want to be every race, every gender, every religion, all that stuff. And when you select your life, it's like picking a character in a video game. You select your character, and then you're shown this like little video, like almost like a trailer of the life. And it's going to be all the kind of the biggest moments, that kind of stuff. And you get to see just like a quick rundown of how the life's going to go, the general timeline. And in there are like certain benchmarks, certain, you know, significant events and certain moments through that life that are shown to you that kind of stick out, right? They're almost like tagged. And you see them before you enter the life, then you enter the life. You play the life. We have free will, I think it's important to say. So basically you have like a general script that you're accepting, but then you have free will to deviate from it. You can deviate as much as you want, but that's what we have guides for. We have our oversoul, our guides that kind of guide us. So that's why sometimes in life you'll feel little nudges from guides. That's to keep you on track, because after all, you picked this course, you picked this character, you picked this mission. So you're supposed to stay on course, but we do have free will, so you can deviate. But as you go through life, some of these moments that you'd seen before when you're watching the like trailer of this life stick out to you. And whenever you hit that moment in life, that's deja vu because you've seen it before. You saw it when you selected this life. So it might be something insignificant, like you're having a conversation with somebody and you notice like a necklace and the sun hits it just right and it kind of makes a sparkle and you'll be like, whoa, this is freaking me out, man. I've seen that before. You know, according to Michael Newton and his past life regression patients, that's what it is. So I know deja vu is a hotly debated topic and everyone has different points of view on it. So I'm not saying that's what it is. That's just what he says through all of his data, and it makes sense.
So can we run that back in like a one sentence just so I understand what you're saying? Because I think I know what you're saying, but I want to make sure that it's solid. So take me to the part you just said that when you see a necklace, that's deja vu. What do you mean by that?
So at the soul level, you know, outside of the simulation, you saw that before because you watched this sort of preview of the life that your next incarnation. So you saw this preview of the life, and instead of showing you the entire 80-year, 90-year life, they just show you this. It's like a trailer for a movie, and there's going to be certain scenes in there. Well, deja vu is when you actually you select that incarnation, you go into the life, and then you're living the life, and those scenes happen in real time. You remembered it from when you were selecting that upcoming incarnation, that upcoming life. So it's kind of like, say you watch a trailer for a movie, and then you go and watch the movie, and then you get to the scene in the movie that was in the trailer, and you're like, I've seen this before. It's like that. But it seems so foreign to us because we have a memory wipe when we come into the simulation.
That's it, dude. Oh, man. The first episode of Universe the Game was about Journey of Souls.
Nice.
So, yeah,
good stuff.
that is part of what led to the podcast was studying Dr. Michael Newton. I mean, there's some wild claims in Dolores Cannon stuff. I'm not saying it's all true. I think Dr. Michael Newton, I really liked his work because it was so grounded. And there was a lot of, like we talked about before, we want to see if we're talking about things that we aren't currently experiencing and can't prove necessarily. We want to see a lot of evidence. And he had that, right? He had the tens of thousands of people that said, hey, we're experiencing the same thing. This is before the books too, you know? So that always fascinated me because it felt like the lobby of a video game. You know, it's like there's a lobby. Here's maybe where we come from. You know, the home, the Goldshire, so to speak. So, yeah, man, very very interesting stuff. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna jump into another part of this. What we're doing here on Universe the Game is we have a part of it that we put in another place, so that way it's left alone. So we're gonna do a little bit more on the conversation here, or that's gonna be a part of the Patreon. So if you want to find that, link will be in the description. But I've got one last question before we do that, and that is, let's say, okay, that the Nordics, they've decided, hey, bud, dude, you're coming really close to the truth here. We're gonna need you to come with us, and you realize that, oh shit, this podcast is the last time I'm going to get to talk to humanity. Oh shit. So let's say that is the truth, and you might get on a ship after this. If you had one message to give humanity about really anything, it could be a sentence, it could be a paragraph, could be really anything you'd like. What is the thing that comes to mind that you would want to leave humanity with?
Wow, great question. And hopefully I don't get abducted after this, but I'm
not trying to put that on you.
No. It might be fun. I'm always down for an adventure. You know, I'll use a personal thing. So my mom was someone who fought injustice, right? And she fought it. It drove her crazy whenever she saw people abusing power and taking advantage of people and that kind of stuff. She fought it. And unfortunately, she fought it so much, it made her really sick and she ended up passing. A big part of it was the stress that she brought on from fighting all the injustice. So what I've learned from that, because I used to be that way too. I used to get really furious about, you know, you just look at social injustice, you look at injustice in the world, wars and this kind of stuff, and it would just eat me up. Once I kind of, you know, accepted the fact that this world is supposed to be a little messed up and a little twisted, that it doesn't mean you're just supposed to let evil things happen. I think we have a conscience, and I think just by nature we're supposed to do good and fight evil. But you have to make a balance, and you have to realize, okay, this world is an obstacle course. This world is a minefield, and your job, for the most part, is to navigate the minefield, and it is to not change the world, but make it through the world, and you have to find that balance between still doing the right thing and helping people when they need help. I think that's, service to others is a huge thing, and always, focus on that. But don't try to save the world to the point where you kill yourself. You know what I mean? Because I see a lot of people out there that literally are doing that, and I've seen it firsthand, and I watch it, and, people just let these things just eat them up. And, even though you're fighting a good cause, sometimes you just get, consumed with it, and people freak out, and you see it everywhere. And it's because we're good natured people and we want to help. So I think seeing the world as an obstacle course, and our job is to navigate through it, live and learn, and help others when possible. But also knowing that and having that understanding, I think, helps you balance it out so you don't let it consume you. And then you can enjoy the world too, because even though there is atrocities happening constantly, there's beautiful, amazing, awesome things happening constantly too. You just don't hear about that as much. So I try to seek beauty, I try to seek positive things, and try to find the good in things, because there's so much good out there. And I just kind of try to remind people of that. Don't focus on the negative, don't try to save the world, try to navigate the world and seek out beauty. And the more you do that, it kind of changes the channel of your kind of TV station.
And there it is, man. Wow. So I think we'll leave this. I want to say, I'm sorry to hear that about your mom. And I want to leave this first portion with a quote, because when you're speaking and you're saying this, it resonates so deeply within me, because I've seen that within myself too. And one quote that really helped me with that is actually a Nietzsche quote. And I'm just going to read it. And he's a famous philosopher of the 1800s and early 1900s, right? So he said, whoever fights monsters should see to it. Let me start that over, because I want to make sure I fucking nail this. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. And I think that's important, because to me, what you're saying is that there needs to be a level of, like, doing exactly what you said earlier, which was take a step up, take a 10,000 foot view. You said you like to zoom all the way out. Sometimes it is beneficial for that, because you start to see that maybe there's two forces working in harmony to some level, which is what we see in Taoism and that type of thing. So, yeah, man. All right. There's that. I like to have those, because if anything ever happens, I have a message that, I can share with the world. And I ask everybody that question. I
love it.
What would they share? Great. So yeah, now getting into the second portion. If you want to hear the deeper, exclusive second portion of this podcast, consider joining the Patreon below. The link is in the description. You'll get instant access to the rest of the conversation, where we go much deeper. If you enjoyed this podcast, consider sticking around, hitting subscribe if you're on YouTube, and continuing to explore more episodes here. My goal with this podcast is not to tell you what reality is, but it's rather to give you many different perspectives on what it could be and let you come to your own conclusion. Thank you for being here on this journey with me, and I'll see you in the next episode. And until then, peace.